All right, all right, all right. Welcome into another episode of Hockey Royalty, the official podcast of hockeyroyalty.com. Today, we got a very special guest, Chris Peters, talking a lot of World Junior Championships here. So sit back and let's go. Well, how's it going, Chris, man? Welcome back to the podcast. How you been?
Brandon, it's good. I've been all right. It's just kind of coming down off of the World Juniors. It always seems to take me a while to get back into the swing of things, but glad to be back and glad to be talking hockey.
Yeah, man, thank you for coming back on. And speaking of World Juniors here, I mean, I know it's been the first full go at this tournament in a long time, with COVID and this and that. How was the atmosphere? I know the summer tournament really didn't have that pop with the fans and everything like that. How was the atmosphere this time?
Yeah, the atmosphere was great. I mean, I think that the people of Halifax and Moncton were excited to have the tournament. The buildings aren't, NHL buildings, so they're a little easier to fill, and they filled them. I mean, there were great crowds, especially for the Canada games, but even the non-Canada games. Both semifinals were packed up, and both medal games were packed up. So it's normally you play a bronze medal game in front of a half empty stadium, and that wasn't the case this time around. So that was really fun to see. And I think there was just a buzz. And you mentioned the summer. I mean, the summer was, both from a hockey standpoint and from a fan support standpoint, was just it didn't feel like the World Juniors, and this definitely feels more like it. So it was a great experience for me as just somebody that was following the tournament, but I'm sure it was an amazing experience for the players who were playing in front of great crowds and really raucous atmospheres. So it was pretty cool to be there and to witness that.
Yeah, I bet, man. It seems like a tournament that you have to go to at least once in your lifetime to kind of view that, and hopefully I can be able to witness that there. Kings fans in the past have had 9-10 prospects to watch over this, but the prospect pool is growing older, and we only had 3 prospects this time, so we don't have to talk for an hour and a half in depth about all the prospects that we're playing there. Let's kind of touch base with Otto Salin here. He was from Finland. Obviously, a lot of people thought that maybe he was drafted a little bit too late. If he would have played more during the season, he probably would have been a higher pick. Right shot defenseman, runs about 5'11", 187. Had a couple assists in this tournament. Looked pretty good for Finland. What did you see from his game?
Yeah, I think Finland was just a really tough team to gauge overall because they just weren't very good this year. They lost their opener against Switzerland. They lost to the U.S. And then lose in the quarterfinals to Sweden. So it was a massive underachieving year. But Otto Salin ended up playing a pretty significant role for the team. Top 4 defenseman essentially for a good chunk of it. He got more ice time in some of the more critical games. I think overall, he's I think he was drafted in the right spot. I think that I don't think he's a high end prospect by any means. He's definitely a guy that, is progressing well in Finland. You never really know some of those, but he's kind of, an average sized defenseman who's only okay offensively. And I think that's basically what he was at this tournament. He had the 3 assists, but I think 2 of those were against Latvia. So, against Latvia. So I'm trying to remember my games here, but I think that's
the coffee will kick in eventually.
The coffee will kick in eventually. Yeah. I mean, and he was also one game where he was pretty darn good, and where most of Finland was good was against Slovakia, which was a good team in the tournament, and Finland really had their best game in that one. So that was positive to see. I mean, the thing is he's an 04. He still has another opportunity to go back to this tournament next year. The fact that he was there as an 18-year-old is a very good sign. The fact that he's playing as many games as he is in Finnish, the top Finnish Pro League, is a really good sign. So, he's heading in the right direction, and we'll see kind of what happens next for him. But, I'd imagine he'd play an even more prominent role next year.
Yeah, throwing it over to Kenny Connors here for USA. He's playing for UMass right now. 18 points in 18 games. really outperforming what a lot of Kings fans thought he would this year, and then was kind of a surprise add to the World Juniors. I know he was kind of had that flash in a couple games there with the 2 goals, but most of the tournament he was kind of on the bench there. What did you see from his game? Do you like the way he's been developed so far since his draft year?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Kenny Connors to me was always going to be part of that team. He's such a versatile player, and even though he's kind of um, a later or a mid round draft pick, I think that he's a really interesting prospect. What he's done at UMass this year is really good. Over a point here, he's been a point per game player for the Minutemen. And then, at the World Juniors, he ends up playing a 4th line role, but that 4th line was very good. They played way more than most other 4th lines would. They played, sometimes they played more than USA's 3rd line. Some games they even played a little bit. They had more of an impact than the 2nd line. And so, Kenny Connors had 2 goals in the tournament, one of which was against Canada when the US looked like, hey, they might actually get the better of Canada here before the wheels fell off, and that made it 2-0. And he was also on the PK, and so like he was an important player for them. Really, the only bad moment I thought of his tournament was when he got kicked out of the Slovakia game for and it was a little bit late, and it was a little bit high, and that was it. And he got the boot for that and had a major penalty to kill off as a result. But aside from that, I thought he was really good in the tournament, and I like the player a lot. He's just such a versatile, good, hardworking player. He's kind of a heart and soul kind of guy, but he also has the offensive capability to produce. So, I think that he's got a chance to eventually one day be a bottom 6 guy at the NHL level, and be kind of one of those guys that's never a star but always effective. Because that's kind of what he was for USA too. He wasn't a star player, but I thought he was a major contributor.
Yeah, you need those when you try to make cup runs, the 3rd, 4th line contributors to come in. So I don't know if you know this, but I've been the conductor of the Brent Clark hype train all off season. So if you want to pass to come aboard, you're more than welcome to. First class is still available. But this was the big thing for Kings fans here. I mean, a lot of Kings fans, including myself, thought maybe he shouldn't even go to this tournament. Like he should be on the Kings all season. Wherever that may be, they've been a log jam there, but he gets the opportunity and takes the most of it. I mean, I think he played a point per game here in the World Juniors. I thought that he was what we thought he was when he was drafted. High offensive player, will make some gaps on defense, but overall, a very effective player. Kind of what did you see from Brent Clark, and was he as expected? Was he more than expected for you? Kings fans want to know, my man.
Yeah. I mean, I thought he had a really strong tournament overall. The production was there. The puck movement was there. He played big minutes, top 4 minutes for them. I think it was telling that, in the key, late stages and other things that they were leaning much more heavily on, Ethan Del Mastro and Olin Zellweger as their top pairing. And then Brant Clark was basically kind of that number 3 defenseman for them that they were able to lean on fairly much as well, just because they didn't have they at various points of that tournament, Canada was playing at most 5 defensemen with regular shifts. And Brant Clark was one of those guys. So I think what we've seen from him is his maturity, his ability to make smarter decisions with the puck. He's improved enough defensively where you're not as worried about him in that regard. He's still not great there. That's still going to be a challenge. And I think that's, they were trying to manage kind of how they utilized him in that tournament, but he's getting there and he's continuing to develop. And I thought he absolutely should have been at this tournament. I don't think he's NHL ready. I know a lot of people saw the little glimpses at the beginning of the season. But his pace still needs to improve. He's a very intelligent offensive player. But as you mentioned, he kind of can make those mistakes that are super noticeable, where it's just he tries to do a little too much with the puck. And I think that's the sign of a player that's really confident in their offensive capabilities. And that's a good thing. You don't want him to lose that. He'll just pick his spots better as he gets more experience. So, I think going back now, going back to junior, having an opportunity to kind of be the man and play major minutes and try to, contend with Barry is going to be a good thing for him. I know Barry was trying to make some moves at the deadline to be even more competitive and didn't really, make the impactful, like I think they were in the Shane Wright sweepstakes and everything else. So they didn't necessarily get the top end guys, but that then puts a little bit more on Brant that he's got to be, exceptional. So I think he's, there's nothing to worry about with him, in terms of his projection and where he's at. I think the thing is when you're the Kings and you're a team that's competitive and you feel like you have a chance to, to go into the playoffs. I don't think he's ready to help them in that regard yet, but I do think that he'll be there, next year. And they have a great problem where they have just too many good young defensemen in their system to have to, basically put Brant Clark back. Going back to Barry is not going to hurt him. It's only going to help him.
Well, I'm not too happy that I have to put away my hype train in the shed there for another offseason. But I guess according to Chris Peters, I do. I guess according to the Kings, he's being sent down. We'll see if he gets called back up at the end of the season, maybe for the AHL and whatever there. As far as his offensive game, like you mentioned, you see him obviously engaging the play quite consistently, very aggressive and confident in his game. I thought it was interesting that what you said is that eventually he'll learn to pick his spots better as he gets older. What does that look like to you? Did you see too many like him in this tournament stringing his defenseman out to dry or his defensive partner out to dry, or is it just the fact that he wants to do too much or he wanted to prove himself too much in this tournament?
Yeah, we didn't see it as much at the World Juniors, actually. I think that was we saw more of the maturation of him where he's not trying to do too much with the puck. But I mean, like the thing that we've seen of him historically is bad reads at the offensive blue line that leave both him and his defenseman chasing, a breakaway the other way. Saw that many times in his junior career and also at various stages. Sometimes getting a little too deep in the zone and he doesn't have great foot speed. So recovery is a problem for him. Like if he doesn't get back, or if he gets caught deep and then he doesn't have the recovery speed to get back like some other, highly offensive defensemen do. The other thing too, just understanding, I think he's got a better understanding of how he needs to defend with like, he's not a really great backwards skater. And so he does a lot of defending from the side, which is actually not uncommon. It's actually becoming more common where a defenseman will maybe not turn around and face the guy, but it'll actually go shoulder to shoulder kind of. And like Quinn Hughes does that. Duncan Keith actually did that for a large chunk of his career. So there are players that can do that successfully. And so, I think that's just, basically his limitations in his skating. That's kind of some of the stuff that he has to do. But those are the things that he can work on in junior. I think the only thing you'd be worried about with him going back to junior is just developing some of the bad habits that were there before where, he did try, making some of these passes and different plays that just ended up going the other way. But I think for him, because of his high end skill level, you don't want him to be too safe either. You don't want him to just oversimplify his game. So it's just finding that happy medium, I think, between, the kind of Hail Mary plays and just the right play, or the simpler play, or, using his hand skills to get himself out of trouble and not throwing pucks blindly. Those are the things that he's going to continue to do. And I think we're seeing that now. And I think the time in the NHL really did help like that, even though he's not staying with the Kings, having had that taste of the NHL, having had a chance to play with Drew Doughty, having had a chance to be around high level players, is just going to help him long term. He's going to have a lot better of a time going forward here.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I really liked what I saw, and I think that it will progress. Let's get into what all Kings fans want to know. I mean, with the demotion of Cal Peterson into the AHL and Jonathan Quick playing less than stellar would be a nice way to put it. Kings fans are kind of wanting this high-end goalie prospect. I know they were rumored to have tried to make a move to get Wallstead, move back up into the first round to get Wallstead. That didn't end up panning out. And no really goalie prospect has kind of pushed themselves to the forefront in their prospect pool. I know there's no high end first round goalie talent in this draft, but where is there maybe a gem that the Kings could find? And did one of these players maybe play at the World Juniors?
Yeah, so actually this year for goalies, it's not the Wallstedt, Askarov, Spencer Knight kind of goalie that you're going to see in the first round, but what you will see is a number of highly intriguing draft prospects at the goaltending position. There are a couple guys that were A-rated prospects by Central Scouting earlier in the year. I don't think they will remain as like first round candidates, but one is Michael Hrabal, who plays for the Omaha Lancers in the USHL. Is supposed to go to UMass, so he's on the Jonathan Quick track apparently. Slated to go to UMass next season. He's a 6'6", almost 6'7" goalie, who is extremely athletic, extremely good in his positioning. Omaha is not a very good team, so his numbers aren't going to look impressive because he's getting hung out to dry all the time. But we've seen some really strong games from him this season that show that he could be a high-end goalie. In terms of guys that were at the World Juniors, I think that a lot of them are multi-year eligible players. So Thomas Milik, the goalie for Canada, not drafted, will still be eligible this year. Thomas Suhanek, not drafted. He was the Czech goalie, still eligible this year. Both of those guys are, they're not the prototypical NHL size but again, Jonathan Quick isn't either, and he had a great career, and is still, still going and has proven that you can do it. So those are two guys that'll get looks. One of the guys that's more in the mold of the modern NHL goalie is Adam Gajan, who is the goalie for Slovakia, another second-year draft eligible player who had a tremendous tournament. He was the Directorate Award winner as the top goalie in the tournament. And almost beat Canada in the semifinals. He's playing in the North American Hockey League this year, and has also spent some time in the USHL. He may spend one more year in junior before going to the University of Minnesota Duluth. And so he's a guy that's on a little bit of a longer timeline. But if you watch the World Juniors, like, wow, this guy's got a lot of tools. There's a lot there if he stays on this track, that could be the guy. That could be a guy to grab in the second round even. And so I think he's gone from, essentially an unknown to almost a second round goalie. And that was kind of what happened with Peter Kochetkov, who's now the goalie for Carolina. He was not drafted, goes to the World Juniors, lights it on fire, gets drafted in the second round, and now he's in the NHL 3 years later. So there are some really good, good paths for these goalies. And so I think that there's going to be a run on the second or third round on the goalies, the top end goalies of this class. So you may have to go a little bit earlier than you'd normally want to with a goaltender to get one of the good ones. But that's the thing. It's always a crapshoot drafting goalies. The play fluctuates so much that, you're never really sure exactly what you have. So even Minnesota's like, well, we drafted Jesper Wallstedt, but is he going to be our starter in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? It's hard to say. He looks pretty good though. So, I think he'll be fine. But like those are the things that it's a tough position to acquire. And even look at, Cal Peterson and his NHL trajectory. It's fluctuated greatly over the last few years. We thought that he'd be a number one by now. And it hasn't really panned out. So a lot of strange things happen on the journey for these guys. But, I think that this year there's a good pool of young goalies to look at to say, hey, this is a position that we really need to address. There's, 4, 5, 6 options to do it. And Trey Augustine as well, who I didn't talk about, but is another guy that is, he's a first-year draft eligible, who was playing in the World Junior Championship. And that's really difficult to do. So maybe he's the guy too. So there's a lot of different options available at the goaltending position, but you might just have to draft him in that second or third round.
Yeah, so that sounds intriguing. No high-end guy, but a bunch of guys pooled right in the second and third round there. Yeah. Lastly, I know people, if you're watching this on YouTube, he's wearing an Iowa State shirt. I'm a Niners fan. How about Brock Purdy? What is going on there, man? Let's go. That kid's been phenomenal. I love it.
Yeah. So, I went to Iowa State, and my first year there, we had Seneca Wallace, and he was like a Heisman candidate, and it was amazing. We had this, but Brock Purdy's the best quarterback that's ever played at Iowa State, and I got a chance, to watch him, and he was my son's first football game. He was there, unfortunately, threw a game-ending interception, but game-ending pick six. But I love Brock Purdy. I mean, I think that he's a guy that there are a lot of more Cyclones in the NHL now or NFL now. And to see what he's done with the Niners, man, it's been fun. I mean, like I'm a Chicago Bears fan, but I'm a Brock Purdy fan too. So, being able to watch him do what he's done, seeing, for going from Mr. Irrelevant, it's great. It's great for me as like a draft guy too, just watching a prospect that was drafted last in the pit and then he's able to make this transition. It's amazing to watch what young players can do in the right situation. That's another thing is if you put a guy in a position to succeed and you give him a George Kittle, which is, for us, for Cyclone fans, it's been a little bit painful watching him throw to a Hawkeye all the time. But you put him in the right situation. Same thing with hockey players. You put him in the right situation, that there's so much more that goes on around a player that impacts their success or lack of success. And so to see Brock Purdy just slinging it around for the Niners, man, I've loved it. I think he was the rookie of the month for December too. So I'm just like, I'm all in on Brock Purdy, and I'll definitely be watching the Niners with great interest as long as he's on the field.
Yeah, let's quest for 6 right there, buddy. So, well, Chris, thank you for coming on, my man, talking some hockey and a little bit of NFL there. He is now the content creator for Flow Hockey. So go over there, follow him on Twitter. His handle is right there on the bottom, Chris M. Peters. Give him a follow for all your draft coverage coming up. I know the Kings may or may not have a first-round pick, depending on how aggressive they are at the trade deadline. But thank you for coming on and talking some World Juniors, my man.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right. And as always on this podcast, go Kings go. All right. Once again, thank you for Chris Peters for coming on. As always, this podcast is brought to you by DraftKings. Hockey fans, light the lamp this winter with DraftKings Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the NHL. New customers can bet just $5 pregame money line on any NHL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. If that wasn't enough excitement, you can turn small bets into bigger payouts with same-game parlays. Combine multiple bets like which team will win, how many goals will be scored, and more for your shot at a bigger payout. Download DraftKings Sportsbook app now. Use promo code THPN. Bet $5 on any NHL team to win their game and get $150 in free bets if they do. Only at DraftKings Sportsbook with code THPN. Minimum age and eligibility restrictions may apply. See show notes for details.